And today it looks like we're going to be going over more about the yoga karakas within each individual ascendant. Now, there's a great course available on this by Ernst Wilhelm. It's an extensive course, and I highly recommend taking it because it's going to take these ideas, this basic information that we're sharing, and expand upon it. It's going to allow you to see how to work with the yoga karakas in a mathematical fashion to see just how much are they going to give. Whether it's with the yoga karakas, also the bhava yogas. Essentially, this is the course that deals with Parasha's formula for yoga judgment. Hopefully I'll remember. I'll put a link to that either on this post or within the description of this talk. But what we're going to focus on today are the general principles. And these are a little more detailed than you're probably used to getting, even though they're general principles. And that's what we have to remember, is that the yoga karakas, Parashar's bhava yogas, they're complex. And there are mathematical aspects to it, like considering the Shubha and Ashubha strength. There's a number of things we have to look at to put together to see how much are we going to get. And again, this is why oftentimes yoga karakas sometimes don't seem to promise, or don't seem to give the promise that they're supposed to when you look at a chart. And other times you'll see a chart where you think, wow, this chart is a total wreck, but somehow this person is extremely successful. And that can be because of the Viparit Raj yogas. So that's when we get all of the difficult, evil planets coming together, destroying each other, and so then the good is allowed to come about. Some of you may know that I occasionally do some sword fighting, which is a lot of fun. Good cardiovascular exercise and good hand-eye coordination. But I'm not necessarily the best sword fighter on the field, which is okay, because one of the things I discovered, and hopefully none of my sword fighting friends are watching, is that when we go into a battle, if I just hang back and let everyone kill each other, then I go take out the last person, I win. So that's an example of a Viparit Raj Yoga, and that's sometimes how it works out. You don't have to destroy your competition, because if there's other competition, they'll do it for you. And then you just have to be at least somewhat good enough to take care of the rest. But, you know, we'll always remember this, that good things are good, obviously. But sometimes bad things can cancel each other out, which can also be good. And I may have mentioned this in a previous video. I don't remember. I seem to talk a lot about astrology, so I oftentimes forget what I've said before. But I've worked with a number of people who've had really beautiful charts. And that's not always a good thing. It is good. I mean, the luckier you are, the easier things work out. Typically, the happier you are. But the reason I say it's not always a good thing is because if there's very little malefic influence, say within the angles or within the chart itself, that's prominent, well then the person doesn't have many difficult experiences to deal with, that they can build up their self-esteem and their strength and overcome obstacles later on. So always have to remember that a little bit of difficulty, a little bit of obstacles, that's what makes a person stronger, which means that when their luck runs out, they don't have to worry about luck because they have the skills, the capacity to move forward and be successful anyway. Now, we don't want all malefic influences, obviously, because that will make a person experience a lot of difficulty, and that can crush an individual. So what we see is there needs to be this balance. And when we work with the energies within our charts, we don't want to get rid of all the harshness, because sometimes we need harshness. Just like we don't want to overly focus on the positive, because that can get in the way. So there's got to be a balance. There's got to be a balance within all our lives. The ability to deal with the difficulty, also the ability to accept grace. Because a lot of times when we have a lot of malefic influences, particularly on the moon, the person will have difficulty accepting good fortune into their life. And you might know some of those people. They're the people that when things are going well, they're always waiting for the next bad thing to occur. So they're not actually appreciating what's going well. So astrology is great for trends and probabilities, but it's also really good for understanding who you are in regards to what are your patterns, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. And that's hard sometimes as an astrologer to share with a client, because a client is oftentimes so caught up in their karma that they can't quite see that maybe they're being a little too pessimistic, or that maybe they're relying a little bit too much on luck. And to be honest, the hardest sessions I have are those people who have a lot of good planets like Jupiter in an angle, or another benefic in an angle, where things in those areas just happen to naturally work out for them. And so trying to tell them that they need to get more discipline, they say, well, why? I've been lucky. And they don't realize that luck runs out. All these karmas, good karmas run out too. Bad karmas run out as well. All karmas run out. As long as you quit giving attention to it, in time they all run out. And this is why the path of self-knowledge is so helpful, because it's not focused on karma. It's focusing on your internal clarity that is beyond karma, that is beyond the good and the bad. That way, as the good arises, you let it pass. As the bad arises, you let it pass. This is how we exhaust our karma, maintain that state of inner clarity, so that we wake up. The more things we do to bring good into our life, well, that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that is also generating a karma. So we have to ask ourselves, are we interested in self-knowledge and self-realization and clarity, or do we want to just have a continuously happy, pleasant existence? And that's fine, but that's not leading to self-knowledge. I remember a talk one time when I was learning Kriya Yoga and studying Kriya Yoga. I learned from a man who studied with Paramahansa Yogananda, and he had read Autobiography of a Yogi, and he used to have time to ask Yogananda questions. And one time they were walking along the grounds, and Yogananda asked him if he had any questions. And this man said he never really had any questions, but for some odd reason, when Yogananda asked him, this question popped into his head. And it was, how many of the saints and sages that you talk about in Autobiography of a Yogi, how many of them are actually fully and completely liberated and enlightened? And he said, Yogananda came right back and said, not many, hardly any. That most of them are content to hang out in the bliss of God communion. Remember, God is a concept too, a nice concept, but a concept nonetheless. Most of them are content to hang out in the bliss of God communion, and they never go all the way. And that's like a person who's so focused on being pure and holy and happy all the time and doing good works and charity and austerities. And that builds up more good karma, so of course they enjoy their future lifetimes, but it's not really leading to clarity. It's not really leading to self-awareness. Now, it's easier, hopefully, to be self-aware when you're happier, because then you can focus on the self more. You're not dealing with problems. But getting pulled into happiness all the time and getting pulled into the need to have everything go well all the time, well, that's a trap too. And we can go on and on about this, and I realize I just got off topic, but the point being that with astrology, what you're seeing is the karma, good or bad, of a particular individualized aspect of consciousness. And we can learn to work with that. So if the person has no concern for spirituality or self-realization, no big deal. Just tell them to keep doing good things, donating to needy people, focusing on being happy, being of service to the world. That's fine. But if they're interested in self-knowledge and self-realization, they can keep doing that because it's nice to have a nice life. But they also need to start focusing on that happiness, unhappiness are just two sides of the same coin. What we need to focus on is what is experiencing the happiness or the unhappiness, right? And that's the practice of Kriya Yoga. It clarifies, it clears out all of these inner karmas. It allows you to experience that stillness so then you can see it clearly. And so some of the best astrology clients I have are not people that are asking for predictions, but people that are asking for, where am I getting tripped up? Where am I not seeing things clearly? What do I need to do to focus on to, experience whatever goal I want to experience? And, we can be very realistic and honest with them, and hopefully they'll listen. But the more they've meditated, the more they have distance from their karma, the easier it is for them to hear it. That's what we have to remember. The easier it is for them to hear it, because otherwise they're too caught up in the personality aspect. But again, I digress. I had a good meditation this morning, so I guess I'm feeling inspired. But let's keep going. So, for the Yoga Karakas, there's a few things we need to know. Yoga Karakas, Raj Yogas, They come together, they bring strength, they bring power, they bring fortune together into a person's experience. Now, there can be pure ones, there can be stained ones, and there can be broken ones. The house lords, which we've kind of covered previously in another video, contribute to this. Combinations of trinal lords, angular lords produce Raj Yogas. When a ruler of the 3rd house, the 6th house, or the 11th house gets involved, then we start to get obstacles to the yogas. And I've got some quotes here from Brihat Parasha Horashastra. And one of them is from the Yoga Karakas chapter that reads, Trishadaya lords in all ways are mentioned as grahas of evil effects. And so the Trishadaya, as Ernst Wilhelm speaks about in his course, a compound word which indicates the 3rd, the 6th, and the 11th Rashis, the owners of the 3rd, 6th, and 11th Rashis. So those are the ones that cause evil effects, that break our power and our purpose when they get involved in royal yogas. It's also said that the 12th, this is from the same chapter, the 12th, the 2nd, and the 8th lords, from their associations, the effects are caused, which means that the rulers of the 12th, the 2nd, and the 8th typically give the effects of whatever they're with. So if it's with a Yoga Karaka, Raj Yoga combination, it helps to support that. If it's with one of the evil lords, the 3rd, 6th, or 11th, it helps to support that. So these are actually considered to be more neutral when it comes to Raj Yogas in particular. Now, each planet, not each planet, each sign has particular planets that give these yogas, and also has planets that break these yogas. And I'm going to read them to you. Again, these are quotes from Parasha Horashastra, and we're going to go through each of the ascendants and just let you contemplate this and think about it. All right, so first one. For Aries, though the 8th lord, Mars, causes auspiciousness in association with an auspicious planet, Saturn, Mercury, and Venus are evil. Why is this? For a Aries ascendant, Saturn rules the 11th house, Mercury rules the 6th house, and Venus rules the 7th house. Auspicious are Jupiter and the Sun. Not auspicious is the simple yoga of Saturn and Jupiter. Jupiter's dependence also ensures evil action. Now, Jupiter's dependence, that's because Jupiter rules the 12th house. So, for an Aries ascendant, when Jupiter gets involved, he can have the potential of causing more distress. Venus is a particular killer with the qualities of a Karaka. Saturn and evil grahas are also killers. Thus, the effects are known as caused by Aries Lagna. So again, the planets we have to be aware of, in particular, Saturn, Mercury, and Venus. They're considered evil yoga breakers. Jupiter and the Sun contribute to yoga. It's because the Sun rules the 5th house, Jupiter rules the 9th house, and Jupiter can give evil effects, particularly when combined with Saturn, because Jupiter rules the 12th, and as we mentioned earlier, the 12th is by association. So we see here it's complicated, just from this very beginning example. And as we go through these, think about these indications as I talk about them. Pause the video, write them down, think about it. And if you start thinking about it, it'll start to unlock itself in regards to why these things might be the case. We've already touched upon it in a previous talk. But if you want to go in great detail with this, I mean extensive detail, you need to consider taking the course, the Parasha formula for Yoga Judgment, offered by Ernst Wilhelm. And as I mentioned, I'll put that link somewhere on this YouTube site or possibly on the blog post when I post this. But that's where you're going to get your most detailed information about how these things work, how the Bhava Yogas work, how the Viparit Raj Yogas work, how all of them fit together, and then you'll really understand the potential within the particular chart, and you won't just be going by, oh, well, we have the Lord of the 5th and the 1st, or Lord of the 9th and the 10th together, so therefore we've got a Raj Yoga and everything should work out great. You do that, you're going to keep getting people saying, no, not quite the case. But if you get into it, it'll unlock itself very easily. But enough of my commercializing. So let's get back here. So Bhava Lords for Taurus. Jupiter and Venus and the Moon are evil. Now this is for Taurus. Jupiter, Venus, and the Moon are evil. And again, consider what houses they rule. Auspicious are Saturn and the Sun. Raja Yoga producing is Saturn. Mercury offers less auspiciousness. Jupiter, etc., and also Mars destroy, having Marika qualities. Thus, the modified results caused by Taurus Lagna according to the sages. So Jupiter, Venus, and Moon are evil for a Taurus ascendant. And what do we mean by evil? Now, we need to understand this first, because a lot of you are going to jump to the conclusion that, well, they're evils, therefore they're just bad for an ascendant. Well, they're bad in regards to the things that are going to get in the way of the life path. For example, Jupiter is still going to be a karaka for father. Moon is still going to be a karaka for mother. Jupiter is still going to be a karaka for our wealth. Moon is still going to be a karaka for our capacity to receive within our life. Venus is still going to be a karaka for the spouse, for a man's chart in particular. And that means that when we look at them in karakas on their own, just by themselves, they're still going to be good for those things. All right, so we want to separate out what we're talking about here with Raj Yogas. Well, Raj Yogas, these are things that get us on our path, that support our dharma. These are not representatives of specific aspects within our life, such as the normal karakas are. And trying to keep this as clear as possible because it can be confusing. And one of the reasons Venus is considered to be evil for a Taurus ascendant is because it rules the 6th house. So one of the things that can really get in the way of a Taurus ascendant is oneself. Remember, Taurus is meant to be that's more Virgo, taking care of others, providing for others, nourishing. So think about the symbolism of Taurus. And when a Taurus ascendant gets too self-absorbed, well, then they're not considering nourishing others. They're just trying to gain. Those are like the greedy, hoarding Taurus types of people. So we need to keep in mind that there are multiple streams and strings of confluence that we need to understand here. So Jupiter can still be good for spouse, for wealth, in and of itself as a karaka for those things. But when it comes to a person's life path, Jupiter is going to have the potential to get in the way of a Taurus ascendant. All right, so Jupiter, Venus, and Moon, they cause problems in regards to royal yogas, Raj yogas. Saturn and the Sun are auspicious. Why? Well, the Sun rules an angle, the 4th house, but it's also a malefic planet. Remember, when malefic planets own an angle, they actually work better. Saturn's the same way. Saturn, for a Taurus ascendant, owns an angle. The 10th house. The 10th house is one of the best of the angles, and so it becomes particularly auspicious. And for a Taurus ascendant, Saturn also rules the 9th house. Right. So Saturn rules an angle, he's a malefic, but he also rules a trine, the 9th house. So he becomes particularly auspicious for a Taurus ascendant in regards to the person's path in life and their direction. So Mars destroys having Marika qualities because he rules the 7th house. And for Mercury, well, Mercury rules the 5th house, so that's a good trine. That makes him auspicious. And the Moon rules the 3rd house. So again, remember, 3rd, 6th, and 11th. Jupiter rules the 11th for Taurus ascendant. These are the planets that are going to get in the way of a person's path. And we need to think about, what does that mean it's going to get in the way? Well, When Jupiter gets in the way of a person's path, that can make a person too focused on wealth. So trying to base one's dharma off of wealth. Jupiter can indicate husband for a woman, which can show that sometimes focusing too much on the husband can get in the way, or focusing too much on a particular, how do I put it, a particular cultural ideal can get in the way. Taurus are down to earth. They're not meant to be all lofty and into high ideals. Mars also represents how things should be. So Taurus is meant to be practical in the sense of what needs to be done to provide for myself and those people I'm responsible for. When Taurus can do that, they work very well. But think about this, review, pause the video, listen, and contemplate why these things are the case. Write them out. Because the more you think about them, the more it will make sense to you. There's a lot within these particular lines that if you don't stop and think about them, you're going to miss a lot of the nuances. And try not to be hard and fast with your rules. You need to contemplate it. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people will listen to these talks or watch one of the videos on this channel, one of the 100 or so videos that we're working towards on this channel, and they'll jump to a conclusion. They'll say, oh, why have this here? So, therefore it means that. It's not the case. You need to look at it in a holistic fashion, which again is why when people ask me questions that deal with a particular chart, I don't always respond because I can't answer that unless I take the time to sit down and really think about what's going on in the rest of their chart. Maybe I'm slow, maybe I'm just not that great of an astrologer, but for me, I need to sit down, look at it, and think about it. And I don't have time to do that for all of the people who post questions about their own chart. Even the other day, I had one woman who called me 6 times in a row on a Sunday asking me a question, and I ignored it because I was, it's Sunday, I've got my day off, and I like to keep my boundaries in that regard. But on Monday morning, started up again. So finally, I sent a text saying, I can't talk now because I was getting ready to go into a session. What do you need? And they decided that they needed to tell me they needed to talk to me right now because they had this pressing issue. And I mentioned that I was booked up for about 2 months out, 2 to 3 months out, and I need to give my time to the clients who've already commissioned my time out of respect for them, and also because that helps me do good work for them. And she said she couldn't wait. So finally, I had to say, this is inappropriate. You need to contact an astrologer who can work with you on your timeline, but I can't do it right now. So keep in mind, and I hope you understand this, that when I don't respond to some of your questions or I don't respond immediately, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's because I do have to give my time to clients, and I need to give my time to projects I've already dedicated myself to. So I'm not an urgent care astrologer, nor am I an astrologer that can really crank out profound things about your chart in an instant. I need to sit down and think about things. I'd like to encourage you to do that too. But anyway, we digress once more. Let's keep going. We have a long ways to go. So Gemini ascendant. So Mars, Jupiter, and Sun are considered evil. Think about the house lords they rule. Mars, Jupiter, and Sun are evil. Venus is the only auspicious one. Jupiter's yoga with Saturn is like that caused for Aries. The moon is the principal killer who produces effects according to association. Thus, the modified results caused by Gemini Lagna according to the learned. So replay this, rewind it, replay it, listen to it. It'll make sense if you think about the houses that the planets rule that are good, and the houses that the planet rules that are bad, and those by association, which we've already talked about. For Cancer, again, all this is in Brihat Parasha or Horashastra. Venus and Mercury are evil. Mars, Jupiter, and the moon are auspicious. A full yoga karaka is Mars, causing fortune. A killer is Saturn, and the sun from association gives effect. Thus the results caused by Cancer Lagna, stated by the wise. And as we can see here, some ascendants have more planets that give yoga. Cancer has 3. Cancer also has Mars, which is an excellent yoga karaka because it rules an angle and a trine. Whereas Gemini, Venus is considered to be the only truly auspicious planet. So some ascendants have it a little bit better in regard to their path, the ease of their path. And some don't. There's no reason to complain. It just means that they have a different path to work with in life. So for Leo, Mercury, Venus, and Saturn are evil. Mercury, Venus, and Saturn are evil. Mars, Jupiter, and the Sun produce auspiciousness. The simple yoga of Jupiter and Venus is not productive of fortune. Amarika is Saturn, and the moon from association produces effects. The learned know these results of those born in Leo Lagna. Bhava lords for Virgo ascendant. Mars, Jupiter, and the moon are evil. Mercury, Venus are certainly auspicious. Venus and Mercury involved are also yoga karakas, so they produce the royal yoga. Amarika is also Venus because it rules the second house. The Sun causes results according to association, again because it rules the 12th house. Thus the modified results caused by Virgo Lagna according to sages. Why Mars, Jupiter, and the moon? Well, Mars rules the 3rd house. Jupiter is a benefic ruling angles. And the moon rules the 11th house. And keep in mind that when it comes to degrees of yoga breakers and strength, now again, this usually needs to be figured out mathematically, but if you just want to snapshot it, the ruler of the 11th is the strongest yoga breaker. Then the 6th, then the 3rd is the weakest. When it comes to angles and trines, the 10th is the strongest, 7th next, 4th and 1st. So it goes from strongest 10th down to the 1st. The 1st is pretty good because it rules an angle and a trine in general. With trines, the 9th is the strongest, then the 5th, and then again the 1st. So what we see is if you get a 9th and a 10th lord together, but only the 3rd lord is causing the yoga breaking, well, the 9th and the 10th lord are probably going to be able to resist it, which means that the person's career and path might get off track due to hobbies or peers or siblings, but more than likely it's not going to be that big of a block, but it'll be there so you can speak to it. Whereas if we had the ruler of, say, the 4th and the 5th house together, so that angle and that trine, which are in the middle, I don't want to use the word mediocre because they're still pretty good, but average, and then you get the 11th lord in aspect or conjunction with this yoga karaka. Well, the 11th lord is the most powerful yoga breaker, which means that that's really going to get in the way of that particular yoga. So always remember that there's a degrees of power within these yoga karakas as well as the yoga breakers. So Libra. Jupiter, the Sun, and Mars are considered to be evil. Saturn and Mercury are auspicious. Productive of Raj Yoga are the karakas Moon, Mercury. Mars kills. Jupiter and the other evil have Marika qualities. Venus is neutral. Thus, the different effects caused by Libra are known. So productive of Raj Yoga are the karakas Moon and Mercury. Why? For a Libra ascendant, Moon rules the 10th. For Libra ascendant, Mercury rules the 9th. So we get the 10th and 9th together, the two strongest of the angles and the trines. Jupiter, the Sun, and Mars are evil. Jupiter rules the 3rd. Jupiter also rules the 6th. The Sun rules the 11th house. Mars rules the 7th and the 2nd, so that's their mark as killer. And the rest you can consider on your own. Bhava Lords for Scorpio. Venus, Mercury, and Saturn are evil. Auspicious are Jupiter and the Moon. The Sun and Moon are yoga karakas. Mars is neutral, and Venus and the other evil have Marika qualities. Thus the effects are known for Scorpio rising. Sagittarius. Venus is the evil one. Auspicious are Mars and the Sun, and the union of the Sun and Mercury. A killer is Saturn. Jupiter causes neutral effects. Venus has Marika characteristics. The effects caused by Sagittarius Lagna, the learned thus know. So one more time for that one. Venus is the one evil. Auspicious are Mars and the Sun, and the union of the Sun and Mercury. A killer is Saturn. Jupiter causes neutral effects. Venus has Marika characteristics. The effects caused by Sagittarius Lagna, the learned thus know. Capricorn. Mars, Jupiter, and the Moon are evil. Auspicious are Venus and Mercury. Saturn will not kill himself. The killers are Mars and the other evil. The Sun is said to cause neutral effects. And Venus is the only auspicious yoga producer. Thus, the modified results caused by Capricorn Lagna according to sages. So the comment there, Saturn will not kill himself. Well, that's because for a Capricorn ascendant, Saturn rules the first house, and Saturn rules the second house. And the second house is typically considered to be a Marika house, but he's not going to kill himself. Bhava Lords for Aquarius. Jupiter, the Moon, and Mars are considered evil. Venus and Saturn are auspicious. Only Venus is known to produce Raja Yoga. Jupiter, the Sun, and Mars are killers. Mercury is said to give medium effects. Thus, the modified results caused by Aquarius Lagna according to sages. And finally, for Pisces. Saturn, Venus, the Sun, and Mercury are evil. Mars and the Moon are auspicious. Mars and Jupiter produce yoga, and Mars is also a Marika, but will not kill. Saturn and Mercury are stated as Marikas. Thus the effects caused by Pisces Lagna are fully to be known. Okay, so this might be something that you have to review consistently. I know I did, to really understand how it works. The course I mentioned previously, Parashara's Formula for Yoga Judgment that Ernst put out, that was also very excellent in unlocking these ideas. And if you just focused on this in a person's chart, you'd be able to tell them so much. But again, I do think that you need to think about it and consider why it's the case. So this is one more reason why I don't encourage you to use your own chart. And I was thinking about this again this morning, because you're going to get so caught up in the, oh, this is evil, this is bad, this is good. You're going to get yourself in an anxious state. And that's not going to be helpful for you to learn astrology. And if you do that, it's better for you to just get an astrologer to do your chart for you, and someone that you trust, of course. Because looking at someone else's chart, you'll be able to see it more clearly. So always remember, what is your goal? Is it to really learn astrology well, to be of service in that regard? If so, don't look at your chart. Learn it in a different fashion. If your goal is to figure out if this astrologer was right or if that astrologer was wrong or whatever it might be, the best thing for you to do, which is actually probably the most expensive, so I don't necessarily recommend it, is get a bunch of astrology readings and see where astrologers point to the same thing. But there's overlap, that's more than likely going to be true for you. Or maybe you find an astrologer that you really resonate with, that when you speak to that astrologer, number one, there's some rapport. You can tell there's integrity there. They're curious about what you need to know. They're also curious about how you work with your karma. And then in the long term, you'll start to see that the astrologer is helpful, so it gives you helpful advice. And if you find someone like that, great, stay with them. If you don't, well, no worries. There's plenty of astrologers out there. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. Now, this is something you do need to take your time and think about. It's not an easy subject. At least it's not as easy as all the teachers I had in the past made it look like. It's complicated, but it'll unlock a lot of secrets of the chart, of a person's life and a person's path, if you take the time to really think about it and review it. Okay, so next up we have what are the Vargas? That'll be interesting. I've always wanted to talk about that in detail. And then we'll consider looking at dashas, an introduction to dashas, and how to use dashas in a more helpful manner than typically happen for people. Yeah, because for that, even yesterday I had a client who was so stressed out about her K2 dasha, and turned out she had her calculations wrong. She was already in her K2 dasha. And she said, I sort of thought that was the case, and it really hasn't been that bad. And another client who was really excited about the Venus dasha, but it didn't really do anything for him, because even though Venus is considered to be a good planet, usually for dashas, particularly materialistic things, well, it depends on how it's situated within the chart, and it also depends on how it's situated in particular Vargas, because each Varga represents an area of life, and if Venus is good in that Varga, well, it'll make that area of life good in that dasha. If it's bad, it won't. But anyway, we'll get to that. So enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon.